I thought retirement would bring me peace, but instead, it brought me one of the cruelest lessons of my life. After years of working, saving, and planning, I wanted nothing more than a simple evening filled with love, laughter, and the presence of my daughters. Yet the night that was meant to celebrate family and sacrifice turned into the night I realized how far their hearts had drifted from mine. I had dreamed of sitting under the city lights, raising a glass to new beginnings, but what I got was betrayal served colder than the air on that rooftop. And still, I found a way to leave that place with my dignity intact. Thank you so much for watching and giving me your time. It means more than I can ever say. And before I go deeper into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. So please tell me in the comments, because I always enjoy seeing how far my voice travels and how many hearts are listening. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the quietest and sometimes most painful ways. And as I sat preparing for what was supposed to be a celebration of my retirement, I truly believed it would be one of the happiest evenings of my life. I thought about the decades of sacrifice, the nights I worked late, the mornings I woke up tired, but still pushed myself forward. All for the hope that my daughters would see that everything I did was for them, for their comfort, for their future. This celebration was not about money or luxury, it was about love, about showing them that even in my older years, I could still bring joy to our family. I chose the rooftop because it felt like a place above the noise of the world, a place where the three of us could sit together, laugh, share memories, and remember how far we had come together. I even placed framed photos from their childhood on the tables, small reminders of the bond we once shared, and I thought that when they saw those pictures, their hearts would soften and they would remember the mother who never let go of them. But even as I planned every detail with such care, there was a whisper in my heart, a small unease that I tried to push away, because sometimes we see the cracks long before the glass shatters. I was born into a life that never offered me much, and from a young age I understood that if I wanted anything for myself or my family, I would have to fight for it with both hands and never let go. My journey was not one of riches or easy comfort. It was one of long hours, aching bones, and endless sacrifices. Yet I carried it with pride, because at the end of each day, I knew I was building a foundation for my daughters, a life better than the one I had endured. I can still remember the times when we barely had enough to eat, when I would quietly put my own hunger aside, so they would never go to bed with empty stomachs. And though they may not have noticed it then, those moments are carved into my memory like scars that remind me of the love I poured out without asking for anything in return. As they grew older, I worked even harder, taking on every shift I could, saving each dollar, and never thinking of myself first, because my only goal was to see them smile, to see them have opportunities I had only dreamed of as a girl. I sewed their dresses. I stood in the cold at their school events. I clapped the loudest in the back row because I wanted them to always feel that their mother was behind them, no matter how tired or worn down she might have been. Those years shaped me into someone who could endure storms with silence, who could hold her head high even when the world wanted to push it down. And in my heart, I believed those sacrifices would one day be remembered, perhaps not with gifts or riches, but at least with respect and gratitude. By the time retirement came, I thought I had reached a new chapter, one where I could finally breathe a little easier and rest in the warmth of knowing my daughters would walk beside me, not because I had given them everything, but because love had bound us together through every struggle. I was not asking for much in return, only for their presence, their laughter, the simple gesture of celebrating a milestone that to me felt like the closing of one book and the opening of another. I dreamed of that rooftop night as a symbol, a reminder to them that even in my later years I could still gather light and joy, still give them moments worth remembering, and perhaps in the glow of the city lights they would look at me and see not just an old woman, but the mother who had once been their shield, their provider, and their safe place. I imagined us sharing stories over dinner, me teasing them about the little mischiefs they got into as children, and them finally telling me secrets of their own. Secrets that would make us laugh and remind us that family is built on more than blood. It is built on trust, forgiveness, and time spent together. I thought of how I would raise my glass and tell them, with tears in my eyes, how proud I was, not only of what they had become, but of the bond I hoped we still had. That was my dream, that was my plan, and I walked into it with all the hope left in my heart, never realizing that hope would soon be tested in a way that cut deeper than I ever could have imagined. The day of the celebration came faster than I expected, and I woke up with a mix of nerves and excitement, as if I were a young woman again preparing for something that mattered more than words could say. I went over every detail in my mind. The flowers I had ordered, the soft glow of the rooftop lights that I imagined would sparkle against the evening sky, the carefully chosen menu that held pieces of each of my daughter's favorites. Because I wanted them to feel seen, to feel special, to know their mother still remembered even the little things that once made them smile. I dressed slowly that afternoon, choosing an outfit that carried dignity, but also a quiet joy, something that said I had survived the years of hardship and had earned this moment to stand tall in front of the ones I loved most. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I could not help but think about the years that had carved the lines on my face, each one a reminder of laughter, tears, and the countless sacrifices that had brought me here. I touched the small necklace I wore, one I had saved for many years to buy, and I thought of it as a symbol of strength, of the woman I had become despite the storms I had walked through. That necklace gave me courage, and it reminded me that this evening was not only about retirement, but also about showing my daughters that their mother was still a woman with grace and pride. I arrived early to the rooftop, wanting to see everything before they did. And when I stepped out onto the terrace, the city stretched before me like a sea of stars, each light flickering, as though it knew my heart was racing with expectation. The tables were set beautifully, the framed photographs of my daughters as little girls placed carefully at each setting, their smiles frozen in time, reminding me of the bond we once shared, the bond I thought could never be broken. I whispered a prayer of gratitude, hoping this night would be the start of something better, a bridge to heal the distance that had been growing between us in recent years. I sat down and rehearsed the words I planned to say, how I would thank them for walking this journey with me, how I would tell them that even when life pushed me down, thinking of them lifted me back up. I wanted them to hear the truth of my heart, to know that no matter what mistakes or arguments lay behind us, my love for them never changed. I pictured them arriving, smiling as they walked toward me, surprised by the thoughtfulness of the evening, and maybe, just maybe, their eyes would glisten with tears when they saw the effort their mother had made for them. My heart was filled with hope, so strong it felt like it might burst, never once suspecting that within a few hours, that same heart would be struck by the deepest wound of all. As the evening drew closer, I kept glancing at the time, my heart racing with a mixture of nerves and joy. And then the phone rang. I answered quickly, expecting to hear the sweet words of one of my daughters telling me they were on their way. But instead, I was met with a flat voice, almost careless, as my eldest said she would not be coming. She gave no explanation that made sense, just a vague excuse, something about plans changing, and before I could even respond with the hurt that swelled inside me, she ended the call. I stood there frozen, the echo of her words filling the quiet room. And all at once, the joy I had carried for weeks began to sink into the floor beneath me. Not long after, the phone rang again, and it was my younger one, her tone even colder, telling me that she too would not make it, as though the celebration I had planned for months was nothing more than a small inconvenience in her busy life. I tried to find my voice, to ask why, to remind her of what this night meant to me, but she cut the call short, leaving me holding the phone in silence, my hands trembling, my chest heavy with disbelief. It felt as if all the air had been taken from the room, and I could not help but wonder if I had asked for too much, if perhaps the years of sacrifice had been forgotten, brushed aside like dust on a shelf. For a moment, I thought of canceling everything, of calling the rooftop manager and telling him to close the doors. to pack away the flowers and food, and to leave me in the shadows of my own disappointment. Yet something inside me whispered not to give up, not to let the evening end before it even began. I do not know if it was a mother's instinct or the stubbornness life had taught me, but I decided to go anyway. I told myself that even if I sat there alone under the lights, at least I would sit with dignity. At least I would not let the emptiness of their rejection steal from me the dream I had so carefully built. So, I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my face, and carried myself forward, determined to walk into that rooftop, not as a woman defeated, but as a mother who still held on to hope, even when her heart was breaking in silence. I could not have known then that this choice, this small act of courage, would lead me to witness a scene that would forever change how I looked at the two people I had loved most in this world. When I finally reached the rooftop that night, the air was cooler than I expected. And as I stepped out onto the terrace, I felt the weight of both sadness and courage pressing against my chest. The tables were still laid out perfectly, the flowers standing tall, the photographs of my daughters smiling from years gone by glimmering in the soft light, and for a moment it felt like walking into a dream that was missing its main characters. I took a seat quietly, smoothing my dress as though I needed to remind myself that I still belonged there, that this evening was still mine, even if no one else cared to share it with me. The waiters moved around politely, some casting me looks of pity, as if they understood what it meant for a woman to sit alone at a table set for three. I tried to hold my head high, sipping water slowly, pretending as if I were waiting for someone who might still arrive, though deep inside I knew the truth. I whispered to myself that even if the night ended with silence, at least I had given it a chance. At least I had shown the world and myself that I was not afraid to celebrate even when others chose to abandon me. Minutes passed like hours, and just as I was preparing to leave, to gather my things and slip away unnoticed, laughter filled the air. It was sharp, careless laughter, the kind that pierces through quiet moments and changes the atmosphere entirely. I turned my head, and there they were, my daughters, walking in as though they owned the night, their arms linked with men I had never seen before, their faces glowing with excitement that had nothing to do with me. My breath caught in my throat, my heart sinking further than I thought it could, and in that instant, all of the whispers of doubt, all of the uneasy feelings I had carried, came crashing into reality. They did not see me at first, hidden in the corner where the shadows met the light. And so I watched as they took their seats, the very seats I had reserved for them, laughing and clinking their glasses as though this rooftop had been theirs all along. I wanted to cry out, to ask why, but instead I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table, my eyes fixed on the daughters I thought I knew, wondering how strangers could look so much like family. I sat there in the corner, my heart pounding so loud I thought the whole rooftop could hear it, and I watched as the two daughters I had given my entire life to settled themselves into the very space I had designed for love and memory. They called over the waiter with ease, ordering champagne as if it were nothing, their voices bright with joy, their laughter careless, and not once did they glance around to notice the photographs placed at their tables, the small details that only a mother would remember. I felt invisible, like a ghost haunting the night, present but unseen, and the sting of that realization cut deeper than any words ever could. They spoke to the men beside them, with a confidence I had rarely seen, showing them the view, pointing out the beauty of the city lights as though they were the ones who had arranged this moment. I wanted to scream, to tell them that every candle on that table, every plate of food being prepared, had been chosen by me, not for strangers, not for indulgence, but for the bond I thought we still shared. Yet my voice remained trapped in my chest, because part of me still hoped, foolishly, that they might remember, that they might realize this evening was never meant for show, it was meant for us. When the food began to arrive, my heart broke all over again, because I saw their favorites placed carefully before them, dishes I had picked because I thought they would make them smile. Dishes they now shared with people who did not know the history, who did not know the meaning, who only tasted the luxury without tasting the sacrifice. It was as though my love had been stolen and repackaged, stripped of its meaning, handed to those who had no right to it. I watched them raise their glasses in a toast, their voices carrying across the rooftop as though they were celebrating something grand, and I could feel the weight of betrayal pressing harder on my shoulders. I tried to hold myself steady, reminding my trembling hands to stay calm, reminding my heart not to collapse under the pain. And in that stillness, I realized that what I was witnessing was not just a careless act. It was a choice. They had chosen to erase me from my own moment. They had chosen to step into something I had built and make it theirs. And though they had not seen me yet, I knew in that instant that when they finally did, the silence between us would speak louder than any excuse they could ever offer. I watched as they leaned closer to the men beside them, their laughter rising above the clinking of glasses, and I could feel every word, every careless gesture, slicing into me like a knife. The waiter moved with practiced ease, setting down more bottles of wine, filling their glasses until the table sparkled with abundance, and in that moment I realized they had no hesitation, no shame, using the very celebration I had prepared as if it were their own. When the bill was first mentioned, I saw one of them smile in that smug, rehearsed way, and without even glancing around the room, she pulled out my card. The one I had given her long ago for emergencies, not for indulgence, not for betrayal. She slid it across the table as though she were entitled to it, as though my years of sweat and sacrifice existed only to fund her selfish display. The sight of it took the air out of my chest, and for a moment I could not breathe, not because of the money but because of the cruelty hidden in such an act. My daughters had not only abandoned me, they had stripped away my dignity, taking the evening I had built with love and twisting it into something hollow, something that mocked everything I stood for. I gripped the edge of my seat, my eyes never leaving that small piece of plastic on the table, and I thought of all the nights I worked with blistered hands, of every coin I saved, of every prayer whispered in silence for their futures. And now, here they were, spending it all on laughter that did not include me, laughter that turned me into nothing more than a shadow hiding in the corner. I could feel the heat rising in my face, but along with it came a calm I had not expected. It was the kind of calm that grows out of pain, the kind that tells you enough is enough. In that quiet space within myself, I made a decision, not out of anger, but out of the need to protect what little of my pride remained. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone with steady hands, and called the bank. My voice did not tremble as I asked them to freeze the card, to cut off the very source they thought they could exploit without consequence. When the call ended, I slipped the phone back into my bag, leaned against my chair, and let the cool night air fill my lungs. I had taken the first step back toward my dignity, and though they still had not seen me, I knew the moment of reckoning was already on its way. I sat quietly, almost hidden in plain sight, while the rooftop continued to buzz with their laughter, and I felt a strange stillness settle over me, as though my heart had already stepped into the moment before it happened. I knew the waiter would return soon with the bill, and I knew the card they had handed over so confidently would no longer serve them, because I had ended its power with just a few calm words over the phone. Part of me wanted to slip away before the storm began, to leave them tangled in their own pride and embarrassment. But another part of me, the part that had endured years of silence and sacrifice, wanted to witness the truth unfold before their eyes. The waiter approached with a polite smile, the bill tucked neatly in his hand, and I watched as my eldest daughter leaned back in her chair, her face smug with the belief that all would be handled smoothly. The waiter swiped the card, paused, tried again, and then I saw the shift, that small flicker of confusion on his face before he returned to the table. His voice was respectful, but it carried a weight that sliced through the laughter at once. He told them the card was declined, and in that instant, the glow of arrogance drained from their expressions. They looked at one another in shock, whispering hurried excuses, insisting it must be a mistake, their lovers shifting uncomfortably beside them, the joy of the evening suddenly turning into a knot of unease. I felt no rush to stand, no urge to shout or accuse, because I realized I did not need noise to make my presence known. The silence I carried was stronger than any outburst, and it gave me strength as I sat with my back straight, waiting for the moment they would finally see me. They asked the waiter to try again, their voices growing sharper, their tone betraying the fear that they might be forced to pay from their own pockets, something they had never considered because they believed I would always shoulder the weight for them. That belief crumbled in front of me, and though my heart still ached with the sting of betrayal, I allowed myself to breathe in the quiet justice of watching them stumble. It was then, as their laughter disappeared and their faces darkened with worry, that I understood what I had done. I had not only frozen a card, I had frozen a cycle, the endless pattern of being used, dismissed, and taken for granted. For the first time in a long time, I had chosen myself, and though they had yet to notice me sitting only a few feet away, I knew the moment they did would carry a truth that no excuse, no lie, and no desperate smile could ever cover again. The waiter's words lingered in the air like a bell that would not stop ringing, and I could see the confusion on their faces turning quickly into frustration, their voices rising as they demanded he try again, their pride slipping with each second that passed. They had never known the sting of being told no, because I had spent my life shielding them from it, giving and giving until they believed the world itself was theirs to take. My eldest tapped her manicured fingers on the table, snapping at the poor man as though his machine was the problem, while the younger one leaned in close to her lover, whispering furiously, trying to hide the panic that was spreading across her smile. It was a scene I had never imagined. My daughters cornered not by strangers, but by the truth that their comfort was never theirs to own. It was mine, and I had taken it back with one quiet decision. The lovers shifted in their seats, their confidence unraveling as quickly as the evening, because no one enjoys a celebration when the bill cannot be paid. And I watched as their eyes darted between my daughters and the waiter, wondering what they had been dragged into. The arrogance that had carried my daughters into that rooftop began to crack, and beneath it I saw something raw, something almost childlike, as though for the first time they were forced to stand on their own without me to hold them steady. They tried to mask it with anger, insisting loudly that there had to be some mistake, but their voices betrayed them, trembling ever so slightly as the reality pressed harder against their pride. And there I sat, not gloating, not rushing forward, simply holding myself still, because I wanted the weight of that silence to settle into their bones, to remind them that actions have consequences, that betrayal leaves marks deeper than any scar. I thought of every moment that they dismissed me, every time they had rolled their eyes at my sacrifices, every time they had made me feel small, and I realized that this was not about a dinner or a bill, it was about dignity. I had spent too many years begging for their love through my giving, and now I had chosen to let them taste what it meant to stand without me. The waiter's eyes shifted nervously toward the back of the room, unsure what to do, and I could sense the unease settling over the entire table, but I felt no unease within myself. For the first time in a long time, I felt steady, as though the years of carrying them had led me to this very night where I would finally lay down the weight. They still had not seen me, sitting just beyond their gaze, and in that invisibility, I found power. I knew the moment I chose to rise, the moment I chose to step out of the shadows, it would change everything. But I let them sit a little longer in their discomfort, because the silence was doing what my words had never been able to do. It was teaching them. I let the silence linger, watching as their voices grew sharper, their laughter long gone, replaced with hurried whispers and nervous glances. My eldest pulled the card back and shoved it toward the waiter again, her words clipped with irritation, but the poor man only shook his head, explaining that it was no use, the card was frozen. My younger one's face flushed red, her lover leaned back in his chair, clearly embarrassed, and I could see the cracks forming in the image they had tried so hard to maintain. In that moment, all the power they thought they held began to slip from their hands, and for the first time in years, I felt a calmness that was mine alone. They fumbled for excuses, pretending it must have been some bank error, insisting loudly that everything was fine, but I knew, and they knew that their certainty was fading. I watched their pride unravel as quickly as the evening, the confidence they had carried into this rooftop collapsing under the weight of something they had never prepared for. Being forced to stand without the safety net I had always given them. Their lovers avoided their eyes, their discomfort spreading across the table like spilled wine, and still they had not noticed me, sitting quietly only a few feet away, holding my head high in the shadows. I breathed slowly, steadying myself, because I knew what came next would not be easy. The part of me that had always longed for their love still ached, still wished this evening could have been different. But the part of me that had endured their dismissals, their careless words, and now this betrayal, told me I could not stay silent any longer. I felt my hands tighten around the edge of the table, not out of fear, but out of strength. The kind of strength only years of sacrifice and pain can build. The waiter stood awkwardly by their side, waiting for a solution, and my daughters grew more frantic, their voices louder, their gestures sharper, as though volume alone could hide their shame. I knew then that the moment had arrived, the moment when I would no longer sit in the dark corner watching them misuse what I had given. I rose slowly from my seat, the sound of the chair scraping softly against the floor. And though no one else seemed to notice, I felt the weight of the entire rooftop shift as I prepared to step forward into the light, no longer their silent provider, but a woman reclaiming her dignity. I walked forward slowly, each step echoing in my chest like a drum, and though the rooftop was filled with chatter and clinking glasses, it felt as if the whole world had grown quiet around me. My daughters did not see me at first, their heads bent low as they argued with the waiter, their voices dripping with irritation and embarrassment. But when I came close enough, the younger one looked up and her eyes widened as if she had seen a ghost. My eldest turned too, her face pale, and for a moment neither of them spoke, their lips parted but no words coming out, because they had not expected me to be there. Not in the flesh, not watching them in the act of using what was never theirs to take. I held myself tall, not shouting, not trembling, simply steady, and I looked them both in the eyes before I spoke. My voice was calm, even soft, but every word carried the weight of years they had taken for granted. I told them, I canceled dinner just like you canceled your mother. The words hung in the air, heavier than any scolding or lecture could have been, and I saw the shame wash over their faces, their lovers glancing between us with confusion, realizing they'd been pulled into a night that was never truly theirs. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel small in their presence. I did not feel dismissed or invisible. I felt whole. They tried to open their mouths, tried to explain, but the excuses tangled on their tongues, and I did not wait to hear them. I had no desire to let their words twist the truth or lessen the sting of what they had done. I wanted them to sit with the reality that their mother, the one who had given everything, had found the strength to finally draw a line that could not be crossed. I turned from them slowly, the cool night air brushing against my face like a quiet blessing, and as I walked away from that table, I carried with me not the weight of betrayal, but the relief of finally choosing myself. Behind me, I could hear the fumbling, the panic of bills unpaid and dignity lost. But I did not look back, because some doors are meant to close forever once you realize what waits on the other side. As I stepped out of the rooftop and into the quiet of the night, I felt the heaviness I had carried for so long begin to lift, because I finally understood that love cannot be forced and respect cannot be bought with endless sacrifice. My daughters chose their path that evening, and while it tore at my heart to see how far they had drifted, I also knew that dignity was something I could still hold on to, something no betrayal could take away. Retirement was supposed to mark the end of my working years, but in truth, it became the beginning of me learning to stand without begging for love that was not freely given. And though the pain is real, so is the freedom that comes when you finally stop chasing what refuses to meet you halfway. Thank you, my dear ones, for staying with me until the end of my story. Your time and your hearts mean more than I can ever say. And if this touched you in any way, please remember to subscribe so we can continue to share these truths together.